भद्रं कर्णैभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागं सस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Let us now pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all. Thou art all. Thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Dear friends, this is the evening of a very special service. Amongst us to deliver the talk today is Pravrajika Brahmaprana, a nun associated with our Hollywood Center in Southern California. She is now the minister, resident minister at the Vedanta Center of North Texas in Dallas. And we had requested her to come to give a retreat and a Sunday lecture, and then we can go to see some nearby places associated with Swami Vivekananda. So it comes, with a price. I mean, she would have preferred just to go and see those places. But we said, no, you have to put in some work, you see. Then all that comes. So, and she was open to it, that it is worth paying this price, she thought. So, yesterday we had a really very nice retreat. Many those of you who were there in the retreat, one gentleman was just telling me a little while ago that what a beautiful talk it was by Pravrajika Brahmaprana. Talks actually, 2 talks she gave. So today in the morning also she spoke very nicely on Sri Ramakrishna, the love. And now she will be speaking about yoga therapy of well-being. She was initiated into spiritual life by one of our great Swamis, Swami Prabhavananda. And she was initiated into the monastic life in 1984, and after spending years in Santa Barbara convent and Hollywood convent, She, for quite a few years now, how long are you in Texas?
10.
10 years. For the last 10 years, she has been managing the Vedanta Center in North Texas, Dallas. This is her special interest, the yoga therapy and the psychologic workshops and so forth. So yesterday's retreat also was about it, and today's lecture is also on this topic. So without much ado, I request her to please begin her session.
Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here. And as Swami has told you, he has worked me very hard. But I have thoroughly enjoyed being with you all. And we're going to wrap up the talk sequence with this talk, which is one that's very dear to my heart, on yoga therapy for well-being. We'll start with the bad news, and then we'll move into the good news. The bad news is that never before in society have we been so stressed, so depressed, so unhappy. The statistics for depression are astonishing. Antidepressants are the third most common prescription drug taken by Americans of ages, of all ages. And what's heartbreaking is the amount of teen suicide, 1 in 12. It's statistics change, but 1 in 12 teens have attempted suicide. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says the treatment of stress is a $300 billion economy each year, and the cost is $10,000 per worker. And medical journals cite this stress as 60 to 90% of all illnesses, and it's our jobs are a major contributor. So it's very sobering. And there are many reasons why. I'm not going to go too far into those reasons. It can be anything from a weakened economy to job insecurity to a hectic family life. But also, we cannot assimilate the information glut that we are taking in. That is just one of the factors that we cannot overlook. We're mesmerized by our virtual pastimes, our digital communications, and they replace our real company with real conversations in real time. And we're missing that. And we don't realize how much we are missing that. Neuroscientists say that we're not prepared for the effects of the digital media revolution on rewiring our brains. That's very, very scary. So our condition, Vivekananda beautifully encapsulated. When he came, he said, we are caught, though we came to catch. We came to enjoy, we are being enjoyed. We came to rule, we are being ruled. We came to work, we are being worked. We are being worked on by other minds, and we are always struggling to work on other minds. We want to enjoy the pleasures of life, and they eat into our vitals. We want to get everything from nature, but we find in the long run that nature takes everything from us, depletes us, and casts us aside. So what is the solution? Well, desperately we turn to nature and meditation to try to calm our minds. Swami Vivekananda, after his first visit to the West, gave the solution to the problem. There was a young man from the Bengal Theosophical Society who went to him and said, "Sir, I want to sit in meditation, but when I shut the door of my room and close my eyes as long as I can't find peace of mind. Can you show me the way?" And Vivekananda, full of sympathy, he said, "My boy, if you take my word, you will first of all have to open the door of your room and look around instead of closing your eyes. There are hundreds of poor and helpless people in the neighborhood of your house. Them you have to serve to the best of your ability. He who is ill and has no one to look after him, for him you will have to get medicine and diet and nurse him. He who has nothing to eat, you will have to feed him. He who is ignorant, you will have to teach him, well educated as you are. My advice to you is that if you want peace of mind, you have to serve others in this way, all you can." Studies show that social service is a universal prescription for well-being, hands down. But why and how? In the field of psychology, Alfred Adler, founder of individual psychology, formulated service as a therapeutic model. He emphasized a holistic outlook to mental health. He advocated social service as a prescription for better mental health. He said individuals must look outside of themselves and develop social and community relationships in the form of service. According to Adler, persons can't be understood as a collection of parts, but we must be viewed as a whole. Now, that makes sense to us in Vedanta. So the Adlerian perspective is love, society, work, spirituality, the self, is all a relational one. He explained that there are two kinds of people. There are those who feel they have a purposeful, useful life, and so they're content with life. And then there are others who feel that they are without purpose or use, and that leads to discouragement and depression. Studies show, many studies show, that when we give, we are happier people. George Moll, head of the Door Institute for Research and Education in Brazil, explained that research shows that altruism stimulates the same pleasure centers in the brain as sugar and cocaine. Well, that's rather dramatic, and we certainly don't want to turn too much to sugar or too much to drugs, but it shows that this actually has an effect, this doing good for others. And researchers at the University of Wisconsin, especially who focused on Matthieu Ricard, the Tibetan monk and molecular geneticist, who was hooked up to brain scans, they found that this 66-year-old, his brain at that time, which was a number of years ago, produced a level of gamma waves linked to consciousness, attention, learning, and memory never before reported in neuroscience. They found that meditation on compassion can alter our brain and improve people's happiness. This is called neuroplasticity, and I'm sure you're all aware of this term. Ricard explained, it's a wonderful area of research because it shows that meditation is not just blissing out under a mango tree, but it completely changes your brain and therefore changes what you are. So here we have it. If meditation on compassion, which is one type of karma yoga, can produce happiness, why can't selfless service do the same? Meditation on compassion in action. So, what, why, and how? What is compassion? By just saying it, can we be it? I'm compassionate, I'm compassionate, I'm compassionate. The answer is yes and no. Words themselves paint pictures in our mind. Compassion, love, friends, these words soothe our nerves and they generate a feeling of well-being, whereas war, terrorism, crime increase our heart rate and blood pressure. This is a fact. But how many of us can measure up to the Dalai Lama's definition of compassion? He says, remember that the best relationship is one in which your love for each other exceeds your need for each other. Your love for each other exceeds your need for each other. Vivekananda tells us, through the power of love, the senses become finer and higher. The perfect love is very rare in human relation, for human love is almost always interdependent and mutual. But Vedanta also postulates all love is a shadow of divine love. He says, love and ask nothing. Love and look for nothing further. Love and forget all the isms. The very idea of God is love. Seeing a cat loving her kittens, stand and pray. God has become manifest there. Literally believe this, for we can see God everywhere. To understand why, we really have to dive deep into the metaphysical level of the universe. Religion tells us that there is a heart to the universe. And these divine incarnations, these avatars, come from the heart of God, a loving, grace-filled part of God. Not the God of the cosmic order, not the God as a maintainer of justice, not the God as creator, destroyer of the universe, not the God as the giver of the fruits of karma, but the God of love incarnate. The revelation, this revelation is Vedanta's philosophical basis of compassion. Love is rooted in and synonymous with God the Absolute. Satchit Ananda, Sat, the existence through which everything exists. Before Abraham was, I am. Chit, consciousness that contains all knowledge. In him we live, move, and have our being. And Ananda, the peace that passeth all understanding. Swami Sarvagatananda once explained, and I will never forget this beautiful explanation, about Chit. He called it loving consciousness. Not just consciousness, he said, but loving consciousness. And he said, a seer who has that experience sees light, and that light is loving consciousness. So this is compassion in its highest sense. because wisdom and compassion go together. So Ananda is this bliss-filled cosmic creation that we hear about in the Taittiriya Upanishad. In joy springs this universe. In joy dwells this universe. In joy dissolves this universe. So can we experience Ananda, this loving consciousness, this infinite compassion? Vedanta says yes, by realizing the Atman, which is one with Brahman, by deepening and expanding our human love, which is a shadow of divine love. Knowing that our love for something or someone is an unknowing attraction to the Atman. This realization is beautifully expressed in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad when Yajnavalkya says to Maitreya, "It is not for the sake of the husband that the husband is dear, but for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the wife that the wife is dear, but for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the creatures that the creatures are dear, but for the sake of the self." So creation itself gives birth to compassion. Now, what is compassion? The word itself is kam plus passion, which means feeling with, not from the outside, but from the inside. And the Latin word is co-suffering. It indicates an empathetic, emotional capacity, which is part of love itself. We cannot feel compassion without love. And so the source of this deeper interconnectedness with all reaches its pinnacle in the oneness with all. And the foundation of this highest principle in philosophy is manifest in the laws of society, in our personhood. Ethics or dharma of what it means to be a human being. So again, the source of this compassion is in creation. As Rumi said, if there had not been love, how would there have been existence? And in the Aitareya Upanishad, before creation, all that existed was the self alone. Nothing else was. Then the self thought, "Let me send forth the worlds." So from the highest standpoint, our first misconception is the sense of other. Now there are 4 Mahavakyas, but there is one senior Swami in India who told me there's a 5th Mahavakya. These are revelations of the nature of the self found in our scriptures, the Upanishads. Tattvamasi, that thou art the self, one with Brahman. I am Atma Brahman, the self is Brahman. Prajnanam Brahma, pure consciousness is Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. And the 5th one is found in John 4:8. God is love. In the Isha Upanishad, we find in the heart of all things, of whatever there is in the universe, dwells the Lord. He alone is the reality. So this reality is Brahman, omniscient, omnipresent, all-pervading, and immanent, that Brahman immanent is the Atman. And so we understand he who sees all beings in the self and the self in all beings hates none. Or as Christ would say, love thy neighbor as thyself, because the same self exists within all. So then, this practical application of Vedanta's loving consciousness is at the root and the reality of this universe. And it is manifested through selfless service, serving others as the self. This is compassion in action. For in trying to see and serve others as divine, ultimately we see and serve our own self in the other. In trying to see and serve others as divine, ultimately we see and serve our own self in the other. We find our true nature, the Atman, bliss itself within ourselves and others. That is the key. And that is why service is a prescription for well-being. So how do we do this? First of all, we have to aspire to be compassionate, to be compassion itself. And then we strive to be and become that. We do this by practicing our aspiration. How? By infusing our actions with our aspiration, our ideal. By doing. By performing our action in this way, our pure motive penetrates deep into the body and the mind, and we become transformed. So to put compassion into action, we practice selfless service. We serve the self selflessly, without ego. And in doing so, we return to our own source, our true home, the one self in all. And this is why it fills us with happiness and joy, because our home is loving consciousness. So the ramifications are profound and vast. The self is one. So says the Isha Upanishad, one without a second. There is no multiplicity whatsoever. In creation, this world of multiplicity, the self is all. The self is everywhere. One consciousness pervades all, says the Isha Upanishad. This is a radical philosophy. It's a radical religion. It's an outrageous truth. Is it not? Each being is not just a part, but the whole of infinite reality. This whole universe is but a speck in the ocean of being, which each of us is. And by approaching this, even meagerly, through an act of selfless service, no wonder we feel joy. How much more so then when we do so knowingly? This is karma yoga. So what does this mean? To serve and address the self and others, we are communing with the whole of infinite reality. So service, no matter how secular or sacred, is a prescription for well-being and can bring us to the brink of bliss itself. So let us start with the practice of love, bhakti yoga. This practice, this path, leads us back to our source. By loving our true original nature, both within ourselves and within others. Now we know there are 5 types of human love. There's Shanta, the peaceful love. A child who turns to the Father for all its wants, protection, food, etc. There's Dasya, the love that inspires one to serve. It dominates all other feelings. Then there's Vatsalya, motherly love. The God is the child. No element of fear is there in that relationship. Then Sakya, the love of a friend, of equals, of companions, playmates. Like Christ the shepherd, Krishna, Arjuna's friend on the battlefield. And then there is Madhura, this love of husband and wife, love for love's sake, the beloved one. Swami Vivekananda explains, the highest love is the love that is sexless, for it is perfect unity that is expressed in the highest love. It is therefore only in spirit that union is possible. There is no boundary to this love. So the practice of love and compassion as service is karma yoga, the path of action. And there are 3 stages of this karma yoga. Many of you are familiar with this. There's work and worship. Then there's work as worship. And then there is work is worship. So when we work and worship, our 2 acts are separate. In service, that is an outward activity, we're doing good to others in the world. And worship takes place as an inward activity. We're doing good to oneself in our church or temple. But then comes work as worship, Swami Vivekananda's ideal of service in daily life, where we attempt to decompartmentalize the secular and sacred. We try to see the living God in those we serve. And we have to be vigilant about our motive and self-interest. It's a very difficult path. And finally, the culmination is work is worship. Swami Vivekananda's culmination of service, where we see Brahman everywhere as the living spirit. It's an actual realization. And we automatically cherish others as a living God. We lose our sense of the small self by pulling off the mask of the other. And we see the other as a manifestation of divinity, the same divinity that dwells within ourselves. So this seva, this service, is serving our beloved in the form of the other, and it's an expression of loving another as our own self. So we're shifting the center of our focus from the giver to the receiver. And the final goal surpasses empathy. We feel fulfilled, and the recipient feels elevated. Let me give you a beautiful example. In 1949, Swami Pravrajika, my teacher, met an old man in Vishnupur who had met Sri Ramakrishna. As a young boy, his sister was married to someone in Kamapakur, and he went with his sister by bullock cart and stopped at Haldapakur, the pond there. And this boy became thirsty, and he went to the pond alone. His sister went off somewhere for a time, and Sri Ramakrishna was standing there by a tree, holding a branch. This boy didn't know how to drink water without a cup. And so Sri Ramakrishna cupped his hands and said, "Now drink." And he talked to the boy as he drank. He told him to think of him whenever he was in difficulty. Suddenly the sister came running, and she snatched the boy away from Sri Ramakrishna, who was known at that time as the Mad Gadhai. Well, this boy forgot the whole episode, but later in life, whenever he had some troubles, he thought of this Mad Gadhai, and Sri Ramakrishna would appear to him, and his problems would be solved. Only afterwards did he realize that Sri Ramakrishna and the Mad Gadhai were one and the same. So in old age, he would sit under a tree and chant Jaya Sri Ramakrishna in ecstasy. This incident shows us how karma yoga, selfless action, elevates the receiver. Swami Vivekananda learned from Sri Ramakrishna how Satchidananda is the underlying unity of all existence, and how that translates into the practice of social service. And Vivekananda then introduced this into the Ramakrishna mission. We all know the incident. Sri Ramakrishna was seated in his room. He was surrounded by disciples, and Narayan was present. And he was asked to describe the practices of the followers of Krishna. He said, "Repeat the name of God, show compassion for all devotees, all creatures, and serve devotees." And then suddenly he said, "Compassion to all creatures," and he went into samadhi. And when he returned to semi-consciousness, he said, "Compassion for all creatures. Who am I to show compassion for others? Not compassion for humankind, but service to others as a manifestation of God." There were many people present, but Narayan was the only one who understood the profundity of this proclamation and said, "I will proclaim this wonderful truth to the world." Vivekananda said, "See God in every being and serve, not as philanthropy, but as worship." So the premise of karma yoga as service and its realization is established in the fact that God is love, and love is God, and God is everywhere. This unity of existence and service to others reminds us and reorients us to the truth of our interconnectivity with all beings. And so we are able to enter the field of action as opposed to mere thought, because acts of service drive home this truth by physically affirming it through our actions. The practice is to purify our love. We start with forgiveness, forbearance, ahimsa, and then it moves into loving kindness, selfless service. And all of this ripens our ego. It expands our sense of self to include the whole world, not by working feverishly, but by working devotedly. We begin to see all creation, all beings residing within our heart, the abode of God, which is love. King Janaka said, "I am indeed in all beings, and all beings are in me." So this revelation is the wisdom of compassion, the experience of oneness. And waking up means assimilating this truth. Think it, practice it, experience it by living it through the field of action. There's no other way. Now, what are the challenges? Well, how can we serve so we feel fulfilled and the recipient feels elevated? A radical change is needed. We need to shift the center of the focus from the giver to the receiver. And without meditation, we forget who we are working for. Our work becomes ego involved. So karma yoga becomes karma, and it ceases to be transformative. So we must, as karma yogis, be vigilant. Put our mind into our action. Vivekananda reminds us, we have no right to expect anything in return for our service. He says, when you give something to a man and expect nothing, do not even expect the man to be grateful. His ingratitude will not tell upon you, because you never expected anything, never thought you had any right to anything in the way of a return. Oh, this is a very high bar. He says, you gave him what he deserved. His own karma got it for him. Your karma made you the carrier thereof. Why should you be proud of having given away anything? You are the porter that carried the money or other kind of gift, and the world deserved it by its own karma. Where is then the reason for pride in you? How beautiful. This message was brought home to me very poignantly in January of 2013. I was waiting in the car in Hollywood outside of a 7-Eleven, waiting for a devotee to get some cash from an ATM machine. And I sat in the car in the dark. And in front of me was a homeless man. He was standing by a garbage bin, talking to himself. He was mentally ill, homeless, destitute. Many people came and went through the doors of that 7-Eleven. They passed him by, but he continued to stand there in the cold. Suddenly, a car drove up next to the car I was in. A man got out, went up to the homeless man, and handed him a roll of bills. In a voice as though he were talking to a friend, he said, "Take care and stay warm." That was all. And then he got back in his car and drove away. An act of kindness. This homeless man was as astonished as I was. He stared at his bills and walked off into the night. But I will never forget that act of charity delivered in the dark outside that 7-Eleven. It was an act of greatness that I was blessed to witness. So in conclusion, this selfless service is a therapy because it bestows us with compassion and joy. Why? By serving others as ourselves, this yoga leads us on the non-dual path back to our true abode, this light of loving consciousness within ourselves. So this loving consciousness is vast and unending and beautifully expressed in Vivekananda's own words. He says, "May I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God, the wicked, my God, the miserable, my God, the poor of all races, of all species, is the special object of my worship."
Many thanks, revered Brahmaprana Mataji. If you have some questions about what she was speaking, you are welcome to ask.
Therapy, when you say therapy, it's like a self-therapy, like you
Yes.
practice.
Yes, it acts on us like medicine.
And it's mainly karma yoga and
Selfless service, yes, karma yoga. Karma yoga is a very difficult yoga. We say we're practicing karma yoga, but what we should say is we're trying to practice karma yoga. Yeah, it's very difficult. Yeah. But when we can truly do that, it's amazing. Because again, the physical action is driving that aspiration deep within us, transforming us. Yes?
I have a question because it was very interesting that you mentioned that the karma could be that the receiver has a karmic draw because the good is being drawn to that person.
Yeah.
And the giver has a karmic debt for maybe something negative or something.
Well, our attitude, yes, our attitude should not be that we are bestowing something. In this web of life, this person, whoever is in front of us, is deserving. And by having the attitude of, I am serving God within, that person is a blessing to us. And then by serving them with that attitude, it elevates them as well as ourselves. Yeah.
I was thinking more in terms of perhaps the giver paying a karmic debt. And I suppose we all have a karmic debt. So,
But we don't want to be working in that way.
exactly. So if you could explain.
We don't want to be, we don't want to be working in that way. We all have karma, but all of the yogas are unwinding that karma. They're purifying the mind. They're erasing and attenuating the samskaras. So that is the whole process of yoga so that we are able to unite ourselves with God. So that is, when we keep that as the main thing, the main aspiration, not that we're mitigating karmas by doing good to others, then it becomes humanitarian. It becomes, secularized. But when we feel that the other is an opportunity to serve, then, so the aspiration has to be kept very pure. That idea of elevating ourselves and the other by serving the living God. Transcending the law of karma.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
The word selfless work is, I find it a little tricky because, we try, if there's not enough training behind being selfless.
We're trying.
So, isn't karma yoga in itself, like just rendering service to others, can creep in other, we may, instead of being selfless, we may start expecting something. So isn't, with that, the other yogas also seem to be important, like, thinking about discernment and devotion you mentioned, because that preparation has to happen also for us to
Yes.
really,
Yes.
render.
Mhm. That's why I said without meditation we forget who we are working for. Yeah. Without, to be strictly in the field of action, the mind, the mind loses its discernment, and we become very involved. Even we can become very involved in our work at the Vedanta Center. And so it's important to practice all of the yogas to keep them, because we're a holistic individual and we're not just a part. Yeah, we bring in our emotional, our devotional, we bring in our contemplative nature through meditation, we bring in our discernment, our intellectual tendency through jnana yoga. It's more than that, of course, but we bring in that side. We bring all of that in. And they all work together. Yes.
You ended your talk with a quote from somebody.
Yes, Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda. Yeah.
Was it in one of his works?
Yes, it's in the Complete Works. Yes, if you Google a part of that, it'll come up on the internet. It's a very famous quote. Yeah, he was considered like a bodhisattva. He had no desire for his own liberation, but to come back again and again and again. The ideal of sarva mukti. Yeah. Anyone else?
Revered Brahmaprana's talk had so many beautiful points to ponder about. Many. I will just mention one that appealed to me, especially because